The SEC is still going to be the SEC. Nobody should be doubting that the college football playoff won't have ample teams from the conference that are going to make a run to a national championship. But there are also realistic expectations next year, I think, for some teams. And honestly, for us to start believing into them, we have to believe that they are turning the corner in certain spots. So who are the teams that we're talking about? Number one is Mississippi State. And a lot of you are probably saying, why are you throwing Mississippi State on here, Cole? Well, remember what life was like before the Dan Mullen era? Sylvester Croom had 9 wins in 3 seasons. Then he got back to his winning ways in 2005, if I'm not mistaken, 8 wins. Then he was fired the next year. Since Mike Leach's passing, where a new era of actual Bulldog football was, the Bulldogs have gone 7-17 overall. They're 1-15 in conference play, and they have a loss to Toledo, a MAC team on the schedule. 2-10 in the first season underneath Jeff Levy, which was far from being the norm, even for a team that lost its starting quarterback and Blake Shapen, didn't have consistency at wide receiver, and inconsistent defensive play. But the thing is that I want to see if Mississippi State is going to stay at that same level it was underneath Dan Mullen, where 9 wins is plausible. 8 wins, getting to a bowl game, finishing somewhere in the top 25, making the Egg Bowl interesting is plausible. And I love the portal additions. People talk about how many people left Starkville, not about the people that came on in. 26 departures against 24 newcomers, including South Alabama running back Fluff Bothwell, who's one of my favorite players just in the portal in general. Florida State quarterback Luke Kromenhoek, Georgia wide receiver Anthony Evans, Brennan Thompson, who has an understanding of what Levy wants in this offense. Malik Scalia from Texas A&M comes on in. This should be a team that, at least on paper, looks more defined. The foundation was set. I think the culture and the identity was set out in Starkville. But now it's about actually getting to the wins. Can the defense be better? Because it can't get much worse. They ranked bottom 30 in every single category last year, including allowing 34.1 points per game. They were 131st in pass defense and 123rd in total yards allowed. Can you just have stability? I'm not asking Mississippi State to be a player for the postseason. I'm just saying, can you not be the new version of Vanderbilt where you're winning more than just games against Eastern Kentucky and UMass and you're not losing to an NIU squad? You have to get 4 wins next year, for my opinion. Southern Miss, Alcorn State, NIU, Arkansas, Missouri, Texas A&M, Tennessee, and Florida. Can you win 4? Because if you do that, I think that you're trending in the right direction underneath Jeff Levy. If not, you're going into a must-prove-it year 3, where I don't think it matters what the culture is, what the sustainability is, and what the buy-in is. You want to be a better program, you got to have the results on the field. Florida's another one. Florida retained Billy Napier, had buy-in from the locker room, never saw quitting this team, especially in the world's largest outdoor cocktail party. You have Aiden Warner taking on over at quarterback, and you nearly pull off the upset against a Bulldogs team that won the SEC title. You got to 8 wins. But 8 wins isn't the standard out in Gainesville. It never should be also, especially with the talent that they bring in. We're talking about making the college football playoff. We're talking double-digit victories, making it to Atlanta, and at least competing for a conference championship because of what you have on the roster. I get it's a tough schedule. I understand that you have to play a new version of Florida State. You still got to face off against Texas. You still have to go travel to College Station to take on Texas A&M. There's ample talent that is going to be residing on the Gators' watch. But still, it's the second year of DJ Lagway at quarterback, and it's his first full year as QB1. Going through the offseason, knowing that he is the guy that you're buying into. A lot of people like the offensive personnel that they're returning. I do. I think Jaden Ball is going to be one of the big breakout running backs in college football this year. Not the SEC, college football. Trey Wilson and Aiden Mizell plus Jacoby Jackson. There's a lot to like about what you see in terms of the personnel that you're going to have for Lagway to work with. 8 returning offensive starters, including 4 in the offensive line, with an All-American center and Jake Slaughter coming on back. 8 returning defensive starters. How are you not excited about what direction Billy's going in when you realize how much buy-in is in the culture? Yeah, you lost some defensive players, but they were rotational guys. Guys like Jack Pyburn. Guys like the guy that went to Alabama. I'm blanking on his name off the top of my head. He'll come back to me in a minute. But this is now Billy's roster. You have to realize that. It's year 4. Every player that is on this team was either selected by Billy, brought in by Billy, or told by Billy, we need you to stay around if you're going to be bought in to what we're doing for the long term. So I got to see it. If you can go 8-4 next year, I'm not saying that it's the worst thing, but when you finish with the top 10 recruiting class featuring talents like Dallas Wilson, Vernell Brown, Ben Hanks, Ty Jackson, Walter Cruz, and countless others, you should at least be in every game. Florida is currently at the crossroads of college football, and they have to decide what they want to be. They're going to be a team that ends up getting wins over significant programs, ones like they had last year against LSU and Ole Miss to close out the year? Or are they going to be ones that fall short of expectations and finish 7-5 and realize, nah, unfortunately, this is the culture that we've been buying into. It's only going to get worse from here on out. I think Oklahoma fits in this category as well. Brent Venables is calling plays in 2025. We'll get more on that in a moment, but I really like this move. He is all in on Norman for this upcoming year. This is his Roman Empire. And for all you the old folks that don't understand what that means, he'll be sitting in his rocking chair at 80 years old, wondering what the 2025 season was all about. It will be constantly on his mind, good, bad, or indifferent, because this is a defining year out in Norman. I love the hire of Nate Drilling. I love the hire of Wes Goodwin. I think both are really solid defensive minds that are going to fit well inside of the system. I think that Drilling was a really good defensive coordinator who got thrown into a crappy situation last year at Utah State and still would have been probably one of the better rising stars in the industry at 34 years old if he would have taken the job and been the play caller primarily at Arkansas State. But he comes on into Norman. He is now going to work hand in hand underneath what is, in my opinion, one of the better defensive minds in college football. And probably he's going to have a say in the personnel and how the state outlooks. I love the hire of Ben Arbuckle. I love the fact that you're going young. You're going up tempo. You're not afraid to start swinging for the fences. And this is a very balanced offensive approach. You can attack when it comes to what is the run game. You can attack when it comes to the passing attack. You can be very aggressive when it comes to the tight end play. And you landed your star quarterback in John Mateer that I think is going to be a plug-and-play addition and be able to teach the newcomers what the expectations are to run this. If Cam Ward can go from playing in Pullman, Washington to being in New York City for a Heisman Trophy presentation, why can't John Mateer fit the same category? The defense still has talent. The offensive line is a year older and a year wiser for Bill Beatenbaugh. They've added in multiple players in the transfer portal and recruiting that I think is going to be better. But you have to realize that 8-4 is never going to cut it at Oklahoma. And it shouldn't. It's a blue blood program. It's a program with sustainability, buy-in, culture, talent galore, and expectations that should never be put to the wayside because of you came to a new conference. I don't want to hear people say, oh, well, Oklahoma is just turning into Nebraska 2.0. No, Nebraska should have never been where it was in the Big Ten. And Oklahoma sure as hell has learned from those lessons to make sure they never end up in that situation with the Crimson and Cream out Memorial Stadium. And if Venables does go 8-4 in 2025, what does that team look like? Is it once again because of injuries? Is it because of close calls in top 10 matchups where a team gets the ball last and they end up punting and unfortunately you aren't able to put yourselves in the prime position to score? Is it just incompetence? Those are the things that I wonder about with this team. You have to have a winning record next year against these 8 squads. Michigan, Auburn, Ole Miss, South Carolina, Missouri, Tennessee, Alabama, LSU. If you can somehow go 5-3, 6-2, whatever it is against those teams, you've done your part. And offensively, I think that you're going to see Oklahoma turn the corner. Defensively, you're getting all the buy-in from what is Brent Venables going into 2025. And I love it. LSU is on this list as well. LSU has done more with less during Brian Kelly's time in Baton Rouge. Now, stay with me for a minute. I'll answer that in a moment. 2 10-win seasons, a win over Nick Saban in year 1 in Death Valley, a trip to the SEC championship game, multiple first-round picks, a Heisman Trophy winner at quarterback. He's done all of that with really no major expectations. Knew that there was going to be some pieces that were going to come on in. And also, you had a ton of players leave the program, not enter the program. Then last year, you actually do some things, go out in the portal, bring in some right pieces, change your quarterback position, change some things on the defense, go spend money on a defense coordinator and a defensive staff to kind of be the backbone of your team, and you go 9-4. And 9-4 should never cut it at a place like LSU. The big reason why is because there's no more Nick Saban. There's more continuity and there's more identity and honestly more parity in the SEC than ever before. You should be absolutely competing for 10+ wins, an SEC title appearance, a conference championship, a first-round bye. And if you don't get the first-round bye in the playoffs, you better be one of those teams that's hosting a playoff game in Death Valley on a Saturday night in the middle of December, because that's what is expected and it should be required of the LSU head coach. You're one of only 2 teams that's returning a quarterback with over 4,000 total yards of offense last year. Multiple standout receivers are still on this team. Chris Hinton, you brought in Barry and Brown and Nick Anderson. What if they meet expectations? You still have Xavier Thomas. You still have Aaron Anderson, who was the hero of the Ole Miss game. It's a more stable run game with Caden Durham. It's a better defense going into year 2 of Blake Baker. They've brought in everybody for this team. Literally, they have left no stone unturned since losing Bryce Underwood to go out and add in premier pieces in the portal that are going to be sustainable and more importantly, upgraded from the season that you had last year. And you also bring back 2 veterans in the Honky Badger and in Harold Perkins, where you just got to make sure they find a certain role for each other. The best part is that Brian Kelly has finally understood the assignment. Look at his staff this past offseason. One of the biggest blessings, I think, for Brian Kelly going into year 4 is he gets it watching as Notre Dame is punching its ticket week in and week out to the next stage of the postseason. He's added in players and personnel members that have ties to the state of Louisiana. Alex Atkins and Lance Gentry coming on in as assistants. These are 2 names that are highly respected out in the Bayou. And on top of that, you also still have guys like Blake Baker. You still have guys like Joe Sloan. You have countless names in the in the recruiting department that understand what it is to be about Louisiana. And this is an ingrown state that has premier talent. LSU should not be losing players from anywhere in Slidell to Monroe to Baton Rouge to New Orleans, anywhere in the state to other programs in the SEC because they have the personnel to do so. And they got to be able to start off fast. We're now talking about LSU not having a week 1 victory since 2019 when Joe Burrow made history. They got to get a win in week 1 in Death Valley. And let me phrase that. The other Death Valley for the title of Death Valley. And what's going to be a battle between my QB1 and Kate Klubnik and my QB2 and Garrett Nussmeier. Super Bowl 59. 1 game, 2 teams, endless possibilities. And there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether you're predicting the first touchdown, who will take home the MVP trophy, or the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to place your bets and feel the thrill of every moment. With live betting all game long, you can jump into the action, adjust your bets, and ride the wave of excitement from kickoff to the final whistle. Plus, to make the Super Bowl even sweeter, new customers can score $200 when you make your first bet. Just place a $5 bet, and if you win, you get $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or head on over to FanDuel.com/SECU and bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59. Disclaimer, must be 21 plus and present in select states for Kansas in affiliation with Kansas Star Casino or 18 plus in DC. First online real money wager only. $5 first deposit required. Bonus issue with non-withdrawable bonus bets, which expires 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut or visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. Okay, back to the show. Texas A&M, you're on this list for one reason. I'm very proud of you, actually. If you actually talk to many people that are in the A&M community, I just want to say congratulations. You finally reached the realistic expectations, knowing that 8-4 is going to be the punchline until you get over that hump. Here's the problem. Unfortunately, the national media has refused to do that. So many people are putting A&M in their way too early top 10. So many people are saying A&M has the talent and the personnel to turn the corner. And you guys are all like, hey, let's get to 9-3. Let's get out of this 8-4 shindig for a little while before we actually start really believing that we've reached that next step. Unfortunately, A&M does this one thing every single year where they crush it in the transfer portal and on the recruiting trail that people put the wagon before the horse. And they're doing it once again. Marcel Reed, another year in the system, another year with Colin Klein. And now he is truly QB1 moving forward. Connor Wigman's off to University of Houston. Wide receivers, in my opinion, kind of upgraded. Casey Concepcion, one of the best playmakers and one of my favorite players just all in college football, now going to be your go-to target. You also have Mario Craver. You're going to get back Micah Hudson, who I believe was one of the more slept-on pass catchers coming out of high school during the 2024 recruiting class. You have some younger names that are still on the roster. You brought in Jerome Miles, the wide receiver from, I think it was Las Vegas. You still have some really overall good players, including Terry Bussey, that could be a two-way defensive and offensive player. Your offensive line is still very stable. You have a solid run game with Le'Veon Moss, who could lead the SEC in rushing next year. And if it's not him, it's going to be his counterpoint in Ruben Owens. It's a system that fits for Colin Klein to be successful. And you fix your defensive woes by at least adding in talent that is going to better the depth. But we're still hearing this time and time again. How many times did we hear this underneath Jimbo Fisher? How many times did we hear this underneath Kevin Sumlin? How many times did we hear that Texas A&M was right there at the finish line in the red zone and about ready to punch it on in for 6, and then it's a fumble that ends up leading to an 8-4 finish and a bowl game appearance in the Gator Bowl down in Jacksonville versus a college football playoff appearance. That's Texas A&M. That's where this team is. That's where this roster currently resides. And until we actually see them kind of meet those next goals, as Texas continues to win in the SEC, as LSU looks like it's going to win in the SEC, as Oklahoma may be willing to turn the corner, as Ole Miss takes that next step forward, South Carolina takes that next step forward, this is Texas A&M. And unfortunately, for the fan base, who is loyal as all hell, Aggies believe in the culture that is set there. They're starting to realize that until we actually prove it, we have to just endure the 8-4 jokes. And finally, Auburn. It's year 3 for Hugh Freeze. I know what the expectations are on the Plains. And unfortunately, for a lot of people, they don't realize that Auburn is the toughest job in college football. Because for years, not only did they have to face off against Alabama and Georgia as their 2 rivals, they also had to recruit against them in the same vicinity. And they didn't have the results to back it on up. But that wasn't changing out in Barner country. No, they actually believed that they should be winning those recruits. And sometimes they did. Sometimes they were able to bring in better classes than people expected. And what are we seeing once again for Hugh Freeze? Bringing in the right classes. Back-to-back top 10 recruiting classes. But he's 11-14 in 2 seasons, and he has 1 top 25 win, and it came in quadruple overtime against a Texas A&M squad that was starting to fall off its wagon. They exceptionally got better in the portal class. Eric Singleton comes on in. That was the number 1 wide receiver in the portal. Jackson Arnold, who I think is a much more stable fit for this offense that Hugh Freeze wants to run. They have ample depth on the defensive line, on the offensive line. They have some very good up-and-coming defensive players. And they have a really good coordinator in DJ Durkin, that I believe is probably one of the more slept-on personnel members in college football. But at some point, the pantry spoils. And if you're not making the recipe with all the ingredients needed, they're eventually going to hire a chef that does. That's what's going on currently at Jordan Hare Stadium right now. Everything is there to be successful. You have the offensive line, you have the depth, you have the players, you have the personnel. You have kids that are looking at Alabama and Georgia and Florida and Ole Miss and South Carolina and Texas A&M and saying, I want to be on the Plains. I want to be in this system. I want to be around this program and this identity moving forward. Now the only question is, do you have the right cooks in the kitchen that are going to be able to make a sweet dish that takes you to that next stage? It's year 3 at Auburn. You don't get many other opportunities after that to be able to kind of prove yourself and turn in that right direction.